President Biden says the pandemic is over. Social media censorship may be decided by the Supreme Court. And the U.S. swaps prisoners with the Taliban. That and more on this week's headlines. Welcome to America Uncovered. I'm Chris Chappell. Earlier this week, President Biden said that U.S. forces would defend Taiwan if there was an unprecedented attack from China. Wow. He explicitly said the U.S. wouldn't just slap economic sanctions on China like they did against Russia for invading Ukraine. He said U.S. troops would be sent over. This can only mean one thing. That's not what he actually meant. At least according to White House officials. They immediately tried walking back Biden's statement by saying the U.S. policy has not changed in regard to defending Taiwan. The U.S.'s official policy on China invading Taiwan is, please don't. This is the latest in a long string of mixed messages from the Biden administration. It may be confusing to some people, but to me, with my galaxy brain, it makes perfect sense. The U.S. policy toward Taiwan is called strategic ambiguity. And I can honestly say it's so ambiguous, I have no idea what it actually is. A recent study showed that about 10% of Americans 12 and older reported experiencing serious depression in 2020. That is concerning. But even more concerning is the 90% of Americans who said they weren't depressed in 2020. If you were locked in your home for months on end, watching society crumble around you during the pandemic and thought, I feel just fine, then you might need to turn your brain off and turn it back on again because it's suffering from something way worse than depression. But at least you don't have to worry about the pandemic anymore because according to Biden, it's over.
Is the pandemic over?
The pandemic is over. We still have a problem with COVID. We're still doing a lot of work on it. But the pandemic is over.
It's over, but we still have a problem with it. Oh, so COVID is basically like a stalker ex. You've been over them for like 2 years, but they keep trying to come back. Forget social distancing. We need a restraining order. So Biden firmly said the pandemic is over, which you know what that means. I hope Biden's statement is wearing a Fitbit because it's going to get some extra steps in as it's walked back. Dr. Fauci immediately went on damage control, saying what Biden really meant is that the very severe stage of the pandemic, of having 3,000 deaths a day, that stage is no longer present. Does Biden actually mean anything he says? At this point, I feel like if he went to Applebee's and ordered a steak, his press secretary would say what he meant to order was spaghetti from Olive Garden. Several prominent Democrats criticized Biden, including the Senate Majority Leader. The Biden administration recently asked Congress to allocate an additional $22 billion to fight COVID, but by declaring the pandemic over, that's not going to help sway Republicans who were already against the extra spending. This would be like telling your parents you need an extra $100 to buy tickets to the carnival, then telling them the carnival is over, but still asking for the extra $100. But who needs a carnival when you can turn on the news and enjoy my favorite ride, the flip-flopper? More after the break. Welcome back. Last week, Florida Governor Ron DeSantis paid for illegal immigrants to be flown from Texas to Martha's Vineyard. It's an island off the coast of Massachusetts famous for being a summer home to rich people like Barack Obama and Oprah Winfrey. I covered the story more thoroughly earlier this week. Check it out. But even though these immigrants are new to the U.S., they responded like true Americans by suing, specifically Ron DeSantis. The lawsuit claims they were misled into volunteering for the flights by being told they were going to Boston or Washington. Of course, the illegal immigrants didn't actually file the lawsuit themselves. It was filed on behalf of 3 unnamed Venezuelan immigrants by a progressive activist group. The lawsuit alleges these immigrants experienced cruelty akin to what they fled in their home country. I agree. Being sent to Martha's Vineyard is cruelty. $6.49 for a gallon of milk at Kronig's? Outrageous. They fled Venezuela to get away from price inflation. Massachusetts authorities requested a federal human trafficking probe into DeSantis for sending them there. So liberals accuse conservatives of using human beings as political pawns by sending them to other cities. And conservatives accuse liberals of using human beings as political pawns by co-opting them for frivolous lawsuits, which offends liberals since they never treat people as pawns, only as, yes, queens. But both sides are committed to the border crisis. Specifically, they're committed to exploiting it for political points and TV time while doing absolutely nothing to actually solve the problem. A man in a New York City McDonald's pulled an axe out of his bag during an altercation and went on a rampage.
Bro, please, go, back up.
Just another day in New York. The suspect, Michael Policio, was arrested and charged with fourth-degree criminal mischief and possession of weapons. However, he was released without bail, as neither of those charges require bail in New York City anymore, under their cash bail reform program. I covered the controversial idea of cash bail reform and how many feel it's contributing to rising crime rates. Check the episode out. Republican New York gubernatorial candidate Lee Zeldin criticized Palacio's release, saying, "This guy hacked up tables and walls at McDonald's, swung his hatchet wildly at customers, and got released before his fries got cold." Which is patently untrue. This was a McDonald's. His fries were already cold when he got them. But this is just the latest in a string of crimes McDonald's has been dealing with. They have a long history of being victimized by repeat offenders that never seem to get punished for their crimes. Namely, the Hamburglar. Well, these liberal politicians never learn. Speaking of giant corporations that are bad for you, social media. A federal appeals court ruled in favor of a Texas law that seeks to ban social media companies from censoring free speech on their platforms. After the Texas law, House Bill 20, was passed, NetChoice and the Computer and Communications Industry Association sued. They say the Texas law tramples the First Amendment by allowing the government to force private businesses to host speech they don't want to. Essentially, the argument is, you're violating free speech. Nuh-uh, you're violating free speech. A lower court had blocked House Bill 20, but with a federal court ruling in favor of it this week, this could head all the way up to the Supreme Court, which would be a tough decision. After all, the Supreme Court is against free speech being taken away from the people. But the Supreme Court has also essentially ruled that corporations are people too, and that would include social media platforms. There is a simple solution. If social media companies really want to improve society, they shouldn't try and censor their users. They should just stop existing, like MySpace. Here's what society would look like if we didn't have to see what celebrities are eating for lunch or what Kid Rock thinks about the live-action Little Mermaid. And after the break, Queen Elizabeth II's funeral. Welcome back. A recent study indicated that drinking 4 or more cups of tea a day could reduce your risk of getting diabetes. Worth noting, though, is that this study came out of Wuhan, in China. Yeah, that Wuhan. So not sure how much I trust it. I think drinking tea could actually kill you, at least if you drink it in Russia. Queen Elizabeth II's funeral was held on Monday. More than 250,000 people stood in line to see her coffin. Man, I haven't seen that many people pay their respects to a dead queen since Freddie Mercury. The funeral was attended by world leaders from around the globe, as well as actress Sandra Oh. How did she get an invite and I didn't? I swear I never get invited to any of the cool funerals. I'm not the only one who was snubbed, though. Officials from Syria, Venezuela, Afghanistan, Myanmar, Belarus, and Russia weren't invited either. In response, Putin said, "Big deal. I've been to plenty of funerals. In fact, I can cause them anytime I want." Speaking of terrible world leaders, the Taliban. President Biden approved a prisoner swap, trading an American engineer who was kidnapped in Afghanistan in 2020 for an Afghan tribal leader and drug smuggler who's been imprisoned in the U.S. since 2005. While the American engineer's family says Biden did the right thing, I'm a bit concerned about the message this sends. It's kind of like that old story my parents read to me growing up. If you give a Taliban a prisoner, they're going to keep kidnapping U.S. citizens in order to get back more prisoners in the future. My parents went to a weird library. Besides this, the U.S. has expressed interest in having Russia release WNBA star Brittany Griner and U.S. citizens Paul Whelan in exchange for arms dealer Victor Bout. It's kind of impressive America has gone from "we don't negotiate with terrorists" to making trades like they were at a Magic the Gathering tournament. And since this was Biden who made the trade, the Taliban better say no takesies backsies before his administration takes another spin on the flip-flopper. So what do you think about the stories we covered this week? Leave your comments below. And be sure to support America Uncovered by going to patreon.com/AmericaUncovered. Contribute $1 or more per episode. We rely on your support to help us keep making great episodes. Once again, I'm Chris Chappell. Thanks for watching America Uncovered.